Dawn broke cold over the Montana plains the way it always did in December, reluctant, gray, unforgiving. I woke to ice patterns on my window like lace made of loneliness. My breath fogged in the unheated back rooms of the cabin. I'd stopped heating them 3 years ago. No point warming spaces I didn't use. The clinic smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. I knew that smell the way some women knew their husband's cologne. It was the smell of my life, now sharp. Medicinal. Solitary. I set out 1 coffee cup, 1 plate. The morning ritual never changed. My medical supplies lined the shelves in precise rows. 12 morphine vials, 3 surgical kits. Bandages running low, I'd need to order more before the mountain passes closed for winter. I counted each item, touched each bottle. Control was survival out here. Precision meant the difference between saving lives and losing them. I'd become good at not losing them. 4 years since Dr. Brennan died and left me his practice. His instruments, his isolation. 4 years of being barely enough for 60 miles of scattered homesteads. People called me Doc now, though I'd never finished formal training. Out here, experience mattered more than diplomas. I had plenty of experience. Infected wounds, difficult births, fevers that came in the night. I'd seen most everything you could see on the frontier. What I hadn't seen in 4 years was my own reflection smile back at me. I poured coffee from the pot I'd made too strong. It was bitter. The way I'd learned to make it after leaving Boston. I'd forgotten sugar existed. Forgotten sweetness was possible. The cup warmed my hands while I watched snow begin to fall outside. Soft at first, then harder. Winter settling in like an uninvited guest who'd stay too long. Mrs. Hawthorne arrived mid-morning with an infected hand. I cleaned the wound, applied salve, wrapped it in fresh bandages. She talked the whole time about her children, her husband, Christmas coming. I listened the way doctors listen, with half attention, nodding in the right places. "You'll come to Christmas dinner, won't you?" she asked as I finished the bandage. "I work Christmas," I said. "Someone always needs help on Christmas. But you should have family. This is enough." I handed her the extra bandages. "Change these daily. Come back if you see red streaks." She left, looking sad for me. I didn't need her sadness. I had a life that worked, patients who needed me, purpose that filled the hours between dawn and dark. What else was there? I cleaned my instruments with the obsessive care I'd developed, each tool in its place. Each surface scrubbed. When your hands are the only hands for 60 miles, you learn to take care of them. Learn to take care of everything, because no one else will. The landscape outside my window stretched empty and white. Homesteads scattered like lonely stars across frozen prairie. The nearest town was a full day's ride. I'd made that ride twice in 4 years, both times for supplies I couldn't do without. I preferred it this way. Alone meant no one to disappoint, no one to fail. My hands were scarred from years of this work, capable hands, healing hands, lonely hands, though I didn't let myself think that often. When I did, I remembered other hands. Gentle hands that used to hold mine across a breakfast table in Boston. Hands that went cold while I watched, helpless, surrounded by 12 doctors who couldn't save him. Out here, I was the only doctor. No one to fail me, no one to lose. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. It sounded like loneliness given voice, but maybe that was just me. 4 years was a long time to hear only your own breathing in the dark. I should have known peace never lasts long out here. Should have recognized the warning in how quiet the afternoon had become. But I was bent over my supply inventory, counting bandages for the 3rd time, when I heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. Desperate. I set down my coffee cup and reached for my medical bag. Someone was coming. Someone who needed help. That's how it always started. The door burst open with a crack of cold air and violence. A man stumbled through carrying a woman, and I saw everything at once the way a doctor learns to see, taking in details that mean life or death. Blood on his shirt, wrong color, wrong placement. His blood, not hers. The woman's face pale as the snow outside. Her dress soaked through. 8 months pregnant, maybe more. The smell of gunpowder and fear. Put her on the table, I said. Gently. I'm shot, he started. I can see that. She's bleeding. Priorities. His eyes met mine. Dark brown. Steady despite the pain. He understood. Lowered her carefully onto my examination table. Sarah, he said. Her name's Sarah. I was already lifting her skirt, checking for blood. There not as much as I'd feared, but enough placental bleeding from the rough ride. How long ago did this start? Hour? Maybe less. His voice was tight. We were on the trail. 3 men tried to rob us. Later, I pressed Sarah's abdomen gently, felt the baby shift. Strong heartbeat. That was good. Sarah, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, blue, terrified. The baby is fine right now, but you need to rest. Lie still for me. I turned to the man. Really looked at him now. Tall, lean, bleeding from his left shoulder. Bullet wound. I could tell from the entry pattern. But he was standing, pressing his own wound with his right hand. That was good. Meant he had field experience. Meant the wound wasn't immediately fatal. You'll live, I said. If you sit down and stop moving, Sarah is my priority. You are my second priority. In about 5 minutes. You'll be my urgent priority if you don't sit on that cot and let me work. He moved to the cot, slowly, carefully. I watched him from the corner of my eye while I examined Sarah. The way he moved told me things. Military training. Probably. Used to pain. Used to following orders from people who knew better. I could work with that. Sarah's bleeding was slowing. Good sign. The rough ride had aggravated her pregnancy, but the baby seemed stable. I checked the position. Head down. Normal presentation. But 8 months, maybe more. This baby could come any time. You're staying, I told them both. Both of you. No arguments. We have a homestead. The man started. 60 miles north, I know. I know every homestead in this territory. I pressed a clean cloth to Sarah's abdomen. Your wife needs bed rest. Weeks of it. Your shoulder needs surgery. Neither of you is traveling anywhere until I say so. I saw him process this. Saw the fear cross his face, not for himself, for her. That fear I recognized. Had felt it before. In another life. There's a snowstorm coming, I added. You wouldn't make it 10 miles. He looked at Sarah. She reached for his hand with her free one. Their fingers intertwined with the ease of long practice. What do you need from me? He asked. That question, no one had asked me that in 4 years. Your name, I said finally. Marcus. Marcus Webb. This is Sarah. They call me Doc. I moved to examine his wound. This is going to hurt. Been hurt before. I believed him. The bullet had gone through the fleshy part of his shoulder. Clean entry and exit. He'd been lucky. 2 inches right, and it would have hit the artery. I cleaned it quickly, efficiently. He didn't flinch. Field hospital. I asked, Shiloh? Antietam? His voice was flat. Places I try not to remember. I understand that. More than he knew. I bandaged his shoulder with practiced hands. This needs proper stitching. But it can wait a few hours if you rest. Don't move. Don't aggravate it. Don't die. Yes, ma'am. I almost smiled. Caught myself. Sarah needs to sleep. You need to sleep. I'll check on you both in a few hours. Marcus finally sat back against the wall, hand still pressed to his shoulder. Thank you. I didn't answer. Just turned back to Sarah, adjusting her blankets. Thank you. Felt dangerous. Felt like connection. I didn't do connection anymore. Sleep. I told them both. Doctor's orders. But I knew I wouldn't sleep. I'd watch them through the night. 2 patients. 2 lives depending on my hands. The old familiar weight settling on my shoulders. The weight I'd been carrying alone for so long, I'd forgotten it could be shared. 3 days passed like water through a sieve. Sarah stayed in bed the way I told her. Marcus healed the way soldiers heal quietly, without complaint, following every instruction I gave him. I managed them both, plus my regular practice. Mrs. Hawthorne's hand, old Mr. Granger's festering leg wound, a child with fever from the Morrison homestead. I was forgetting things. Small things at first. Where I'd put my suturing needle, whether I'd eaten that day, which patient I'd promised to visit next. Forgetting was dangerous when you worked alone. On the 4th morning, I found Marcus sterilizing instruments. What are you doing? I stood in the doorway of my clinic, coffee cup in hand. Helping? He didn't look up from the pot of boiling water. I didn't ask for help. I know. You wouldn't. He lifted an instrument with the tongs, examined it. Field hospital. Remember, I know protocols. I should have sent him back to bed. Should have told him I didn't need anyone interfering with my practice. Should have maintained the careful boundaries I'd built. Instead, I watched him work, methodical, precise, respectful of the tools and their purpose. Mrs. Peterson's baby was coming any day now. Mr. Granger would need fresh dressings. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight since Marcus and Sarah arrived. Fine, I heard myself say. Instruments only. Follow my instructions exactly. He nodded, kept working. I poured my coffee, turned to leave, and stopped. There was a second cup already poured on the counter, still steaming. Thought you might want it, he said without looking up. I picked up the cup. It was exactly the right temperature. That should have warned me. Should have told me something was shifting that I couldn't control. But I was tired, and the coffee was good. And having someone else there felt dangerous. That's what it felt like by the end of the week. Marcus had reorganized my supply cabinet. I wanted to be angry about it. Wanted to tell him it was my practice, my system, my carefully maintained order. But his system was better. More efficient. Everything I needed within easy reach. I didn't tell him that. Just poured 2 cups of coffee the next morning without thinking about it. Only realized what I'd done when I saw both cups on the table. Old habits forming. New patterns replacing old ones. I should have been more careful. We fell into a rhythm I didn't plan and couldn't quite resist. I'd leave for a night delivery. Come back at dawn to find the clinic cleaned. Instruments ready. Fresh coffee brewing. He learned my routine. Started anticipating what I'd need before I asked for it. Our hands brushed once, passing a scalpel. I pulled back too quickly. Saw something flicker in his eyes, understanding. Maybe recognition of the fear I was trying to hide. He didn't push, just went back to work. At night, I heard him reading to Sarah. His voice low and steady, turning a farming manual into something almost like poetry. The way he talked to her, so gentle, so patient, made something in my chest ache. I'd had that once. Someone who read to me, someone whose voice made loneliness impossible. I'd lost it. Wasn't sure I could survive losing it again. 2 weeks now. Sarah's baby could come any time. I should have been focused on that. On the medical complications of a frontier birth with no backup, no assistance, no margin for error. Instead, I kept noticing Marcus, the way he moved through my space without disturbing it. How he'd learned to hand me instruments in surgical order without being taught. The small scar above his left eyebrow. How he bit his lower lip when he concentrated. When had I started watching for that, "You're good at this"? I said one morning, "We were preparing instruments for Mrs. Peterson's delivery." The words came out before I could stop them. He looked up, smiled. Had a good teacher. It was the first compliment I'd given anyone in 4 years. The first time I'd acknowledged that having him here was... I didn't finish that thought. That night, I set 3 plates on the table. One for me, one for him. One for Sarah when she was well enough to sit up. The table didn't look empty anymore. Neither did the clinic. Neither did I, though I only admitted that to myself in the darkest hours before dawn. Marcus caught me staring one evening. We'd just finished cleaning up after a long day. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. Things I couldn't say. That I should check on Sarah." I said instead. I left before he could see my hands shake. Mrs. Hawthorne's labor started just after midnight on a Tuesday. She'd walked to the clinic alone, her husband away checking trap lines. I was ready, bag packed, instruments sterile, mind focused. Marcus was there before I asked. "What do you need? Hot water, clean towels, and stay close in case I need an extra pair of hands." He moved like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. In those field hospitals, he didn't like to remember. The water was ready when I needed it, towels within reach. He didn't hover, didn't interfere, just stayed present in the way that made work easier instead of harder. The baby was breech. I felt it the moment I examined her. Footling breech. The most dangerous kind. "This is going to be complicated," I said quietly. Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes went wide with fear. "The baby. We'll be fine if you trust me and do exactly what I say." I looked at Marcus. "I'll need you." He moved closer, no hesitation. I talked him through it. What to watch for. How to support Mrs. Hawthorne's breathing. When to apply counterpressure. He listened with the intensity of someone who understood that lives depended on details. The delivery took 4 hours. Every minute of it was careful. Controlled crisis. I guided that baby out inch by impossible inch, Marcus following every instruction I gave him. Mrs. Hawthorne fighting through pain with more courage than I'd seen in women twice her size. When the baby finally came, a boy. Small but breathing strong, the relief was physical. I felt it in my bones. Marcus had hot water ready for cleanup, fresh coffee brewing. He'd learned my rhythms so well I didn't have to ask. We walked back to the clinic together in the pre-dawn gray. The first time I'd had company on that walk in 4 years. "You were good back there," I said. "Had a good teacher." Silence settled between us. Comfortable. Easy. The kind of silence that only comes when you've worked alongside someone through something that matters. "Where'd you learn field medicine?" I asked. Shiloh? Antietam? Places I try not to remember. I had places like that, too. The words slipped out before I could catch them. He glanced at me. Didn't ask. Just nodded. That understanding again. the recognition of shared wounds, different battles. By the third week, I'd stopped counting the days they'd been there, started counting other things instead. How many times Marcus smiled, how many times I almost smiled back, how many cups of coffee we'd shared in the early morning quiet. I noticed things I shouldn't notice. The way his hands moved when he worked, careful, precise, scarred like mine. How he talked to Sarah with such tenderness it made my throat tight. The sound of his laugh, deep, rare, genuine, made me want to earn it again. I'd set out 3 plates now without thinking. 1 for me, 1 for him, 1 for Sarah when she joined us. The table looked different, full instead of empty. The clinic felt different, too. Inhabited. Alive in ways that had nothing to do with medical practice. I caught myself listening for his footsteps in the morning. The way he moved through the clinic, quiet but present. When had that sound become familiar? When had I started missing it on the rare occasions he wasn't? There we worked together through Mrs. Peterson's false labor, through young Tommy Morrison's broken arm, through old Mr. Granger's infected leg that finally started healing under our combined care. When had I started thinking in our instead of mine one evening? We were cleaning instruments after a long day. The sun was setting outside, painting the snow orange and gold. Sarah was sleeping. The clinic was quiet except for the soft clink of metal on metal. "Why do you do this alone?" Marcus asked. "You're too good to be buried out here with no help." The question hit like a physical blow. Touched everything I'd been avoiding for 3 weeks now. My hands stopped moving. It works. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I set down the instrument I'd been cleaning. "Good night, Marcus." I left before he could see how much that question cost me. Before he could see that I'd started asking it myself. Before he could see that the answer was changing every day he stayed. 4 years I'd convinced myself I preferred solitude. That alone was safer. Better. Enough. But somewhere between midnight deliveries and morning coffee, between shared work and comfortable silences, I'd started remembering what partnership felt like. The not aloneness. I'd forgotten what it was like, how it eased the weight on tired shoulders, how it made hard work feel less impossible, how another person's presence could make even a cold Montana winter feel less like exile. I was afraid of that, afraid of needing someone again, afraid of what would happen when they left. Because they always left, through death or distance or the simple passage of time. Everyone left eventually. Better to stay alone, stay safe. But my hands had started shaking when I said goodnight. And that told me everything I needed to know about how unsafe I already was. The Peterson child was 6 years old. Emma, with blonde braids and blue eyes that reminded me of cornflowers. Her mother brought her in on a Thursday. Already too late. Diphtheria. I knew it the moment I saw the membrane in her throat. I did everything. Everything I'd learned in Boston. Everything I'd taught myself on the frontier. Everything 4 years of practice had given me. I worked through the night, Marcus assisting with the quiet competence I'd come to depend on. It wasn't enough. Emma died just before dawn. Slipped away while her mother held her, and I stood there with useless hands. I held Mrs. Peterson while she screamed, stayed composed, professional doctor, until the end. Helped them prepare Emma's body, spoke the right words in the right tone. Did everything a good doctor does when death wins. Then they left. I closed the door behind them and stood there. Couldn't move, couldn't think. The silence was suffocating now, not peaceful. Accusatory. Asking questions I couldn't answer. Why couldn't you save her? What did you miss? What should you have done different. I found myself on the clinic floor at 2 in the morning, instruments cleaned 3 times, 4 times, my hands raw from scrubbing. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I'd have to feel it. The grief, the failure, the terrible weight of not being enough. The door opened. "Marcus, you should sleep," he said quietly. "Can't." "I know." He sat beside me on the cold floor. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer empty platitudes. Just sat there. His presence was the only thing keeping me tethered to earth. After a long silence, he spoke. "You think you failed tonight. Emma died. Emma was dying when they brought her. You gave her pain relief, dignity. That's not failure. Feels like it. Grief always does." He leaned back against the wall. "But you've saved dozens. I've watched you. Tonight doesn't erase that." The words cracked something open in my chest. 4 years of holding everything together. 4 years of being the only one responsible. The only one who could fail. I told him about Boston. The words spilled out like blood from a wound I'd kept bandaged too long. About watching my fiancé die while I sat helpless. About being surrounded by 12 doctors who knew more than I did and still couldn't save him. About coming west to be the only one responsible, the only one who could fail. "If I'm alone, there's no one else to blame when I fail." I said, "Just me." Simpler that way. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You haven't failed. You've saved more lives than most doctors see in a lifetime. One death doesn't erase that. It feels like it does. I know. But it doesn't." He stood, moved to my small stove, made tea with the same methodical care he brought to everything, brought it back, set it in my hands. I cried into the cup so he wouldn't see. He saw anyway. Didn't mention it. Just stayed. We sat there until dawn broke, neither of us speaking. His presence, the only comfort I'd let myself accept in 4 years. When light finally filtered through the windows, he spoke again. "When did I give you permission to know me this well?" I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the same weariness I felt. The same burden of caring too much in a world that took without asking. "You didn't," he said, answering his own question. "I just learned to read your silences." That terrified me. Being known, being seen, all the things that made loss unbearable. I was afraid of this. I whispered, "I know. Needing someone, being cared for. I know that too." The sun rose fully, painting everything gold. I should have pulled away. Should have rebuilt my walls. Should have remembered that letting people in meant letting loss back in too. Instead, I let him sit with me, let him see me broken, let him piece me back together, with nothing but presence and patience. "Thank you," I said finally, "for staying. Where else would I be?" That question hung in the air between us, full of meanings I wasn't ready to examine, but I felt them anyway. Felt the shift happening whether I wanted it or not. I'd started needing him. Started depending on his steady presence, his quiet competence, the way he knew when to speak and when silence was the only language that mattered. I'd been afraid of this for so long, afraid of needing anyone, afraid of what would happen when they left. But sitting there on my clinic floor, watching dawn break over Montana snow, I realized something worse than the fear of losing someone, the certainty of never having them at all. Sarah's contractions started a week before Christmas. False labor, starting and stopping. Each time they came, fear crossed Marcus's face like a shadow. I examined her carefully. Felt the babies? Yes. Twins. I was certain now, and my heart sank. Both breech. Both positioned. Wrong. This will be complicated, I said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. My sister died in childbirth. You're not your sister. I spoke firmly. You have me. You have Marcus. We're going to get through this. But Marcus had heard the hesitation in my voice. After Sarah fell asleep, he found me in the clinic. Can you save her? The question was raw, desperate. I wanted to say yes. Wanted to give him the certainty I'd craved in Boston when I asked the same question. But I'd learned the cost of false promises. I'll do everything I can. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have. His face went pale. I saw terror there, the same terror I'd felt watching my fiancé slip away. The helpless rage of loving someone mortality could steal. I'd run from that feeling for 4 years. He was running toward it. Which of us was braver? What do you need from me? He asked, finally. That question again. The one that broke through every defense I had. I need you to trust me. And I need you to be ready to help. I pulled out my medical texts. We're going to prepare for every possibility. We spent the next 3 days planning. I taught him warning signs, color changes, breathing patterns, what to watch for during delivery. He took notes, asked intelligent questions, learned with the focus of someone who understood that details meant the difference between life and death. I'd never taught anyone before, never shared this burden. It felt strange, vulnerable, like handing someone a piece of your heart and trusting they wouldn't drop it. Late one night, Sarah sleeping, we were preparing emergency supplies. Marcus's hands stilled over the bandages. I'm afraid, he said quietly. I know. You're afraid, too. I could have denied it. Should have maintained professional distance. Yes. But you'll try anyway. Always do. I met his eyes. Trying's all we ever have. He understood. I could see it in his face. We were both standing at the edge of loss. Both choosing to love anyway. Both refusing to let fear make our decisions. I saw my own past in your eyes, I said. Didn't mean to say it out loud. The helpless terror of loving someone mortality could steal. I ran from that. You're running toward it. Someone has to. Why? Because the love is worth the risk. I didn't have an answer for that. Wasn't sure I believed it yet. But something in his certainty made me want to try. Somewhere between instruments and emergencies. They'd stopped being just patients. Sarah was my friend. Her laugh, her stories, her courage in the face of fear, I'd let her in without meaning to. And Marcus was, I didn't have words for what Marcus was. Didn't want to find them. Finding them meant acknowledging what I was feeling, what I'd been feeling for weeks now. Partnership, trust, something warmer than friendship, something I wasn't ready to name. He caught my hand across the instrument tray. Whatever happens, thank you. For caring. About her. About us. I should have pulled away, maintained boundaries, protected myself. I didn't. Get some rest. I said instead. We'll need strength for what's coming. But I knew rest wouldn't come easy. Not with fear sitting heavy in my chest. Not with the weight of responsibility pressing down. Not with the terrible knowledge that I cared too much now. Caring made you vulnerable. Made loss unbearable. I'd sworn I wouldn't care this much again. I'd broken that promise without even noticing. And now, standing on the edge of crisis, I had to decide, was caring worth the risk Marcus thought so? Chose love knowing it could destroy him. Maybe he was right. Maybe the love was worth whatever came after. I just wasn't sure I was strong enough to find out. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in heavy snow. The clinic was warm with firelight. Sarah slept peacefully, the calm before the storm I knew was coming. Marcus had tried to make things festive. Pine branches on the mantel, red ribbon tied in simple bows. Trying to give Sarah Christmas, despite everything. I appreciated the gesture, hated what it represented. Hope, family, the things I'd given up 4 years ago. You talk about heading to the homestead after the baby comes. I said. We were alone in the clinic, Sarah resting. The words came out harder than I meant them to. That's the plan. He looked at me carefully. Unless what? Unless you need us to stay. My throat went tight. I don't need anyone. I know. His voice was soft. Doesn't mean you don't want it. I should have denied it. Should have said the right things about professional boundaries and independent practice. Should have protected myself. Instead, I fled to my cabin, sat there in the cold dark, listing all the ways this could end in loss. Sarah could die on my table. The babies. Marcus could ride away after, back to his homestead. His life. I could fail everyone I'd started caring about. I'd failed before. Watched someone I loved die while I stood helpless. Had spent 4 years making sure it could never happen again. Building walls so high, loss couldn't reach me. But the walls were crumbling. Had been since the moment Marcus carried Sarah through my door. Since the first time he'd made me coffee without asking. Since I'd started counting his footsteps and missing his presence and setting 3 plates on my table. I could leave. Refer them to the doctor in Silver City. Run before loss came for me again. The thought made me sick, but staying meant risking everything. Meant caring so much that loss would shatter me. A memory surfaced. My fiancé's last words. Promise me you'll keep living. Promise me you won't stop caring. I'd promised. Then built a life of careful not caring. Walls instead of windows. Control instead of connection. I'd broken my promise. The cabin door opened. Marcus. Snow in his hair. Concern in his eyes. Saw your lamp. Knew you'd be here. Can't sleep. You're thinking of running. Not a question. How did you know? Because I know what fear looks like. See it in my mirror every time I think about losing Sarah. We stood there in the cold cabin. 2 people terrified of the same thing, choosing different responses. How do you bear it? I asked. Loving someone you could lose, the love is worth the risk. Is it? The question came out broken. I lost someone once. Nearly destroyed me. I know. I can see it in you. The careful distance, the control. Then you understand why I can't. I understand why you're afraid. He stepped closer. But you've already started caring. About Sarah, about the babies, maybe about me too. I couldn't deny it. Couldn't lie to him when he'd learned to read my silences. So you choose, he continued, run from what might happen, or stay for what is happening. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd carried his terrified wife through a snowstorm, bullet wound and all, who stayed despite his own fear, who chose love knowing the cost. You're braver than I am, I whispered. No, I just decided the love was worth whatever comes after. The words settled between us. heavy with truth. When had I started setting 3 plates without thinking? When had good night become the hardest word to say? Because I wanted him to stay longer. When had his presence become the thing I reached for in the dark for? Years I'd been safe and half alive. Which was worse, the risk of loss or the certainty of loneliness? I'd chosen loneliness. Built a life around it. Convinced myself it was enough. But somewhere between midnight deliveries and morning coffee, between shared work and comfortable silences, I'd started wanting more. Started remembering what it felt like to be part of something bigger than survival. Partnership, family, love, the things I'd sworn I'd never risk again. I'm not running, I said finally. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm staying, whatever comes. Marcus smiled. That rare, deep smile that made something in my chest ache. Good. We'll face it together. Together. The word sounded like a promise, like hope, like the thing I'd been afraid of and longing for all along. I'd spent 4 years protecting my heart, forgot that hearts were meant to be used. Meant to risk and break and heal and risk again. Maybe that was what it meant to be alive. Not the careful safety I'd built, but the terrifying leap into caring despite knowing how badly it could end. Marcus reached for my hand. I let him take it. Tomorrow might bring loss. Probably would. Eventually. Love always did. But tonight, standing in my cold cabin with his hand warm in mine, I chose to believe him. The love was worth the risk. Had to be. Because the alternative living without it had stopped being enough. Christmas morning arrived before I was ready. Sarah's water broke at dawn. The sound brought me running from my cabin. One look told me everything I needed to know. This was it. The crisis I'd been dreading. Marcus carried her to the clinic. I saw the blood immediately, his shirt soaked through. The wound had torn open. Fresh. Bright red. Arterial. No. Not now. Not both of them. My mind raced through scenarios with the cold calculation of crisis. Sarah's contractions were 2 minutes apart. Hard, fast. The babies were coming, and they were coming breech. Marcus's wound was bleeding internally. Reopened sutures. Maybe worse. Every protocol said, choose. Triage. Prioritize. Save who you can. But I'd spent 3 weeks learning partnership, trust, the refusal of impossible odds. I'd spent 4 years following protocols, alone, safe, barely enough. Tonight I would break every rule I'd ever learned. Marcus, that cot. Lie down. Now. Sarah needs you alive. I need you following orders. Lie down. He obeyed. I turned to Sarah, caught her frightened eyes. Sarah, I need you to breathe exactly how I tell you. Trust me completely. The babies will be fine. You'll be fine. We're all going to be fine. I said it with more confidence than I felt. But confidence was all I had to give them now. That and skill, stretched past its breaking point. I packed Marcus's wound with pressure bandages. Tourniquet above the tear. Elevation. His eyes were starting to glaze with shock. Stay with me. Marcus, talk to me. Sarah, fighting like hell. Like you. Stay awake. I ran to Sarah. First baby crowning. Breech extraction? I'd done this before, but never twins. Never alone. Never with another patient dying 10 feet away. Delicate work. One wrong move, and I could break the baby's neck. I reached up inside Sarah, found tiny feet. guided them down. The baby slipped out in a rush of fluid and blood. Girl, not breathing. Clear her airway. Rub her chest. Breathe. Breathe for her if you have to. There. A cry. Weak but real. Wrapped her. Placed her safe. Sprinted back to Marcus, blood seeping through the bandages. His pulse thready. I repacked the wound. His eyes found mine. Sarah, one baby down, one to go. You're doing great. Liar. Stay awake anyway. Back to Sarah. Second baby coming fast. Boy. Cord wrapped around his neck. This is where babies die. This is where I fail. No, not tonight. I worked with hands steadier than they had any right to be. Slipped the cord over his head, guided him out. He came in a rush. Silent. No. No. Clear airway. Rub chest. One breath. Two. He cried. Finally cried. Both babies breathing. Thank God. Marcus's wound again. The torn suture. I needed to re-stitch it, but couldn't. Needed both hands. Needed him still. Needed the impossible. Marcus, listen to me. You're going to hold pressure on this wound while I stitch. Can you do that? Field hospital training. He breathed, just like Antietam. Except you're both patient and assistant. Makes it interesting. His hands shaking but steady enough. I talked him through it. Where to press. How hard. Worked as fast as I'd ever worked in my life. This was what I was made for. Not safe isolation, but this impossible crisis. Skill pushed past breaking. Choosing life again and again and again. Split-second decisions. No doubt. Pure instinct and training merged into something beyond either. Marcus talked me through his own suturing. Sarah pushed when I told her. We moved together, like we'd done this 1,000 times, instead of once. Partnership tested by fire and holding. I was enough. More than enough. We were enough. 4 hours that felt like 4 years. 4 minutes. Time moved different when lives hung in balance. But when it was over, when both babies were cleaned and wrapped and breathing strong, when Marcus was stitched and stable and color returning to his face, when Sarah was exhausted and triumphant and reaching for her children, I stood there surrounded by the family. I'd delivered and understood something fundamental. Love wasn't the careful distance I'd practiced. Wasn't the control I'd perfected. Love was this fighting death with everything you have, refusing to choose, saving everyone, or dying, trying. I'd thought love made me weak. I was wrong. Love made me unstoppable. Christmas morning light filled the clinic like benediction. Snow fell soft outside. Inside. 3 people breathed because I'd refused to let them die. I realized I was crying. Didn't bother to hide it. Marcus reached for my hand. Squeezed weakly. Christmas miracle. I looked at the twins. At Sarah crying with joy. At Marcus alive when he had no right to be. No, I said. Just medicine, partnership, and refusing to give up. That's what miracles are made of. Maybe he was right. Maybe miracles were just people choosing love over fear, life over loss, connection over safety. Maybe that was enough. I'd spent 4 years being barely enough alone. Tonight, I'd been more than enough together, and that made all the difference. They called it the Christmas miracle. 3 days after, people started coming, bringing gifts for the babies. Food for Sarah. Thanks for me. The story spread the way stories do on the frontier, growing bigger with each telling. I told them the truth. Competence, partnership, stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. They preferred miracle. I let them have it. Marcus's wound healed clean. Sarah recovered with the resilience of women who'd chosen this hard life. The twins, Michael and Christina, named for Christmas and miracles, thrived in ways that made my heart ache with relief. We fell into new rhythms. Weeks passed. They could have left. Should have. Probably. Their homestead was waiting instead. Marcus found me one morning in the clinic. "Come with us," he said. "To the homestead. We'll build you a clinic there. You won't have to do this alone anymore." I thought about my one plate, my cold cabin, the life I'd built from fear and maintained through sheer stubborn will. "What are you offering? Partnership, family?" He met my eyes. "Not replacing what you lost. Something new." Something new. The words hung between us, full of possibility. "I have conditions," I said. "Name them." "My own cabin. Close enough for emergencies. Far enough for dignity." "Done?" I run my practice my way, no interference. "Wouldn't dream of it." I hesitated. "And Marcus?" "I'm not ready for... I know." His voice was gentle. "We'll build friendship first. See where it leads. No pressure." I nodded. This I could do. This choice I could make. 6 months later, 2 cabins stood side by side in the valley north of town. Mine larger clinic on one side, living quarters on the other. Theirs warm with family twins crawling. Sarah's garden starting. Marcus's fields planted. The space between our doors was easy to cross. Often crossed. Morning coffee became our ritual. Marcus and me sitting on my porch while Sarah slept, watching dawn break over the mountains. We talked about everything and nothing. Medicine and farming and the strange paths that brought people together. 3 plates on my table now. Sometimes 4 when Sarah joined us. He built me proper exam rooms. I organized a medical station in his barn for emergencies. We delivered babies together. Treated wounds together. Faced the frontier together. I taught him medicine. He taught me to let go of control, to trust, to believe that partnership didn't make me weaker. It made both of us stronger. The work was still hard. People still died sometimes, despite everything I could do. But I didn't carry it alone anymore. When grief came, Marcus sat with me. When fear threatened, Sarah reminded me of courage. When doubt whispered, I looked at the twins and remembered what refusing impossible odds had given us. I thought the opposite of loneliness was company. I was wrong. It was partnership. The opposite of control wasn't chaos. It was trust. I'd spent 4 years perfecting isolation. Convinced myself it made me stronger. Built walls so high I forgot there was a world beyond them. Strength wasn't carrying everything alone. Strength was knowing when to run between 2 patients, when to accept help, when to let people see you break and piece you back together. Another Christmas approached. Sarah asked me to dinner. This time, I said yes. I held Christina while Sarah cooked. Marcus rocked Michael. He caught my eye across the room, smiled. "You look happy," Sarah said. I considered that. Turned the word over in my mind like an unfamiliar instrument. "I am," I said finally. "Didn't think I'd get here again." "But you did." "We did." I looked at Marcus, at Sarah, at the family we'd become together. Love didn't look like I remembered. Wasn't wild passion or consuming need. Was quiet partnership, morning coffee, shared work. Trust built in small moments across weeks and months. I still kept my own cabin, still needed space. But I needed them too. Both things could be true. I'd built a life from fear, then rebuilt it from hope. The second version fit better, left room for other people, for connection, for the beautiful, terrifying risk of caring. I learned something that Christmas morning, running between two patients, refusing impossible choices, choosing life again and again. The miracle wasn't what I saved that day. It was what I let myself keep. I'm still the best healer for 60 miles. But now, I'm not the only one. And that makes me better at it. The healing, the living, the loving. Turns out you can be independent and connected, strong and vulnerable, alone when you need to be, together when it matters. I spent years perfecting isolation, thinking it made me stronger. I was wrong. Strength isn't carrying everything alone. Strength is knowing when to run between two patients, when to accept help, when to let people see you break and piece you back together. The miracle was learning that hearts are meant to be used, meant to risk and break and heal and risk again. I'd spent so long protecting mine. I'd forgotten it was made for this. For coffee at dawn, for shared work, for watching twins grow, for partnership that makes impossible odds feel conquerable, for love worth whatever comes after. And it was worth it. Every terrifying, beautiful moment. Worth the risk, worth the fear, worth everything.